So we will now go to our first panel, and we welcome a gentleman from the other side of the Capitol. Welcome back to former House member Senator Vitter. I know you serve on the Senate Banking Committee, and I know also that coming from where you do down south, that you have a number of your constituents who were more than adversely affected, not by the, well, some may by the Madoff case, but more often by the Stanford case, and that you have been a leader in trying to bring a equitable solution to that situation. So we thank you to coming and joining us and commenting. Senator.
Well, thank you very much, Chairman Garrett and Ranking Member Waters, and all of you for the invitation. I really appreciate it. And even more importantly, thank you for your important work and partnership on all sorts of issues, this as well as a lot of challenges that have confronted Louisiana, Hurricanes Katrina and Rita, the BP oil disaster. All of you have been wonderful and generous in terms of our working partnership. Thank you for that. And it is great to be back on the House side. I remain a House member in spirit. I brought a healthy House skepticism to the Senate. In fact, I still don't drink from the water fountains over there, and that's not going to change anytime soon. So it's great to be here. I am here, of course, because this is a very important issue, and I've been particularly involved in the case you mentioned, the Stanford case. I'll submit my full comments for the record, and I'll summarize here. And because of that focus, of course, my comments are going to be very informed by the Stanford case in particular, although I certainly acknowledge the importance of many other cases and share all of your concerns, including in particular about the Madoff case. I'm very involved in the Stanford case because unfortunately there are thousands of victims nationwide, and many of them, many retired oil and gas workers and executives, are in Louisiana. So I'm talking personally to dozens and dozens of them. Like in the Madoff situation, many lost their entire life savings. Many have literally had to sell their homes, go back to work well after normal retirement, things like that. There are real victims who have been taken advantage of. In the Stanford case, as you know, SIPC has denied coverage completely, and that's the fundamental problem. SIPC has basically taken the position, well, these were valid CDs that were lowered in value, lost value, and we don't cover market losses. Well, I think that position is just flat out wrong. And through the Stanford experience, I've come to the conclusion that there is the need for major SIPC reform. It isn't to change their coverage. It isn't to change the parameters of the statute. I'm not here to argue that that should be broadened. Again, I think there is clearly coverage in the Stanford case under the present statute, and I don't propose that SIPC should cover market losses or every evil or bad situation under the sun. Rather, I think reform is needed in a different way, and in some ways a much more fundamental way. I've reached the conclusion that SIPC, if it were a true regulator, would, in the parlance that's used, be a situation of complete regulatory capture. I do not think SIPC is focused enough on following the law and executing the law. I think it's far too focused on serving the industry and its member companies and looking after their interests. And my experience in the Stanford case in particular has led me to that unfortunate conclusion. First of all, let me talk briefly about why there is coverage. As was mentioned, Alan Stanford was found guilty just yesterday of 13 criminal counts. He was found guilty of basically fraud, stealing customer funds. Instead of purchasing Stanford International Bank CDs, the Stanford Group Company, which was a SIPC member, acquired control of its customer funds, and the funds were stolen by Alan Stanford. The SEC and courts have taken the position in litigation that the Stanford companies operated a Ponzi scheme and, quote, a Ponzi scheme is, as a matter of law, insolvent from its inception, close quote. So it's not a matter of real CDs losing value. It's a matter of a Ponzi scheme, a fraud, and Alan Stanford stealing those funds. There are several other precedents in law and other cases that back up this point of coverage. They're in my written testimony. I won't go into it exhaustively. But my first point is that there is coverage. Now, people can disagree about legal points, but what I've really been crestfallen about isn't simply that SIPC has disagreed, but the way they have acted, again, has led me to conclude that they're not primarily focused in the right spirit on executing the law and protecting people properly covered under the law, but they're really focused on protecting their fund and their member companies. Let me give you some examples. The very first meeting I ever had with SIPC, the chairman was there, top staff were there. The first concern mentioned about the Stanford case was the amount of money it would drain from the fund and the reaction of member companies to the need to replenish the fund through other assessments. That was the first thing that came out of their mouths, quite frankly, before we talked about what's the right thing to do, what the law says. Later, after they had dug in their heels for months and months, denying all coverage, after the SEC finally acted and did the right thing, they entered into settlement negotiations and were willing to settle, albeit for far less than 100 cents on the dollar. So apparently their view of the law changed if it was going to preserve more of their fund. When they couldn't reach a settlement, they went back to court and are presently, in my opinion, dragging their feet and prolonging court action as much as possible. This includes spending $200,000 of what is there for ultimate recovery by the victims on certain discovery. This includes presently asking for more prolonged discovery rather than getting to the heart of the issue in the legal proceeding. You put all of that together, Mr. Chairman, in my opinion, that is not a picture of an agency or an entity trying to meet its responsibility to covered victims under the law. It's more of a picture of what would be akin to an industry trade group or association, an active party litigant, if you will, just trying to preserve as much as they can of their resources in their fund. And I believe that's the fundamental problem, and that's the most fundamental need for reform. So, Mr. Chairman, again, thank you for this hearing and calling attention to this important matter, including the Madoff case, including the Stanford case. I think this discussion will promote important reform. I hope in the meantime that SIPC still does the right thing in the Stanford case and that it doesn't prolong the court activity and the litigation, and we get to that bottom line as quickly as possible for the good of all of the victims. And I really appreciate the invitation to be here and all of your partnership on this important issue and other important issues. Thank you very much.